Sometimes I start to think that the Japanese PC indie game scene is dead and hasn't really recovered since the late 90s. Then something like Lost Technology rolls around. Of course, I'm not actually able to speak Japanese, so I probably shouldn't jump to conclusions so quickly. Waren Toga was released in 2009, was a freeware strategy game. And just now, in August 2017, Lost Technology came to Steam. And Lost Technology is essentially our Western release of that. You can still get Waren Toga for free on Freem, and it's obviously gonna be Japanese only. So once I heard about that, I obviously thought, hey, I'm gonna check that out. I mean, I don't speak Japanese, so this is probably gonna be a hard time. But hey, all for the research. Sadly, I couldn't get it to run. Looking at some YouTube playthroughs though, thanks to Free Gaming Tanaka here, it looks like it's basically the same as Lost Technology. The big difference being that it's moddable, so you're gonna have all of these scenarios with different maps and factions and units, and some even seem to have unique mechanics that Lost Technology does not have. So if you speak Japanese and can get it to run, then I highly recommend it. It's essentially a way better version, way more larger version of Lost Technology. If you can't get it to run, but you do speak Japanese, you can also play Lost Technology in Japanese and you get a lot more content, like this scenario here, which I don't know what it does. It has lots of blue flags everywhere and something. And you also get this one here, which is a kind of mashup of all kinds of things. You get these little icons and like these speech bubbles or the end segments you can look at. And I'm sure they're great. Sadly, you know, I can't understand them. You can also look at these text boxes, which background information, I assume, and more lore. And you get these battles, which have their own little story segments attached to them. And in the battle themselves, you will also get certain mechanics or new units which you do not find in the normal game. Like this mission here, for example, has these battleships. I'm pretty sure you can't get those in a normal game. The English version only features the prologue scenario and the tutorial, so that's not a lot. And in the prologue scenario, only 3 of the 11 factions have their story segments translated. This is probably a good time to mention that the game costs a whopping $3, and it's still pretty damn awesome. And I can still very much recommend it, and in this video I'm going to tell you why. Once you start the one scenario that you do get access to in the English version, you get to select your faction. Only 3 of the 11 are translated, but you can play any of the others too, and even finish the game. Everything is translated except the little VN story segments, and they're not that essential to the game. I mean, it's nice having a little bit of context as to why you're doing what you're doing, but then again, the goal is the same every time. Just conquer everything. There's actually one faction you don't have to defeat. They're in the very east and they never attack unless you attack them first, but as far as I can tell it makes no difference whether you conquer them or not, but they're a nice challenge. As you might infer from that, one thing should be made clear. There's some limited diplomacy in this game, and there's essentially no economy management, and, well, not a lot else you can do. The game is actually relatively simple on the surface. There's really one big focus, and that's war. Recruiting units, moving them around, getting them into battle, leading them in battle, and then just kind of doing that over and over again. This is not an empire management game in that sense, if you're used to something like Total War. It's really about strategic troop movement and, well, having the right troops in the right place at the right moment. This doesn't mean the game is shallow by any means, it's just that the basic interactions are simple. This even goes for the controls. You really only need your mouse. You click on things, you drag things around. I mean, the way you move units from one territory to another is actually just by dragging them from one window to another. As a result, even though you're gonna be doing a lot of troop movement and recruiting, the game never really feels like it's slowing down because of that. It never bogs down the action with a lot of this management things because everything just goes pretty smoothly. The recruitment system of this game is also relatively interesting and forms a very basic part of how you have to think in this game. You see, everything here is based in squads. Every row you see in these windows represents a squad, and the first unit of a squad is a squad leader. Every faction only has certain units which can become a squad leader, and depending on what squad leader you have, you can only recruit certain units, because all recruitment is actually done via other units. This even goes for hero units. So if you want to recruit certain heroes, you need certain other heroes to convince them to join you. And especially for the lizard people, This means that they have very limited sets of units because well, humans just don't really like him. And I mean, I guess they have a point. I mean, the whole thing starts out with them essentially just going, hey, let's go and get a genocide. But whatever, I digress. Anyways, the basic interactions of the game are simple, but they're actually pretty damn fun. All this troop movement and recruitment obviously just leads to one thing, and that's battles. If you play as one of the translate factions, you can get these little encounters between the commanders at the beginning of a battle. They add some flavor, and you know, they're nice to have. But the real meat is the actual movement of your troops and telling them what skills to use and not to use. Really, that's the main thing you're going to be doing. You can either select individual skills to be used or not used, or you can also give general, more behavior-like orders, telling people to use summoning magic or healing magic or go long range or close range. Things like that. One important aspect of the game is what I would like to call blob management. It reminds me a little of Total War or Cossacks, more like. Generally, once an engagement starts, you're not going to be doing a lot of movement anymore. Things are largely automatic, or, well, within the confines of the behaviors you set. You can change a lot of things, you can still try to move your units around frantically, but generally that's not going to go very well, and is actually more disruptive than anything. Hero units play a very important role in this game, not only because their stats themselves get very high later on, but some of them have very, very strong spells, or, well, special skills, that can take on an entire army if you're lucky. Or, well, take out your army if you're unlucky. I'm thinking of you, chemical weapons. The battles usually are short and sweet. I don't think I've had a single battle that lasted more than 5 minutes, and the one that did last that long, well, let's not talk about it. So overall, it is very much about balancing your troops, getting good support in the back line, strong in the front line, being able to maybe flank around the enemy and taking out their backline while they're not looking, and using hero skills at the right time. There are some pretty simple but very important interactions between the tactical and strategical layer which you need to understand to kinda have a chance at this game. For example, that little red territory down there is what I'm attacking currently. It took me ages to take it. The elves actually deployed very well here, and there's this river and the forest. They slowed down my cavalry, which was my main asset, so they didn't do very well. On top of that, the elves deployed these stupid mushrooms, which cause confusion, and that makes my troops attack each other instead of the enemy. And then they have these annoying skirmishers, and without my cavalry, they just managed to hunt them down. It's not very good. Luckily, I was allied with the frog people of Goog, who happened to have some territory on the other side of that territory, so we could initiate a pincer attack. By that point, the lizard people had already defeated the elves, because screw the elves. And maybe this wouldn't have been necessary, but hey, I could have certainly used this to win, even against the elves. Later, I did some very bad strategic decisions though. I decided to attack Musket, who I had an alliance with, and from then on, suddenly my troops just didn't seem to be doing that well anymore. I also refused Lion some reinforcements when I should have given them. And then at some point I forgot that my alliances with Goog and Lion were about to run out, so they just kind of took a lot of territory from me that I didn't even have guards assigned to. From that point on, it was just a huge downhill run. Something I hadn't realized was that trust plays a very important role in this game. Being an untrustworthy person, so breaking alliances or just not really doing what your allies want, will lower your leader's trust. Mine at this point was minus 37, I believe, and the one main thing that trust does is that it determines how easy your troops are to rout in battle. So at this point, it barely mattered how many troops I had, they would just always run away. One thing to mention is that the current state of the localization of this game is hopefully not final. The developers have said that based on these initial sales, if the game does well enough, whatever that exactly means, I don't know, they will try to localize the rest of the game as well. And this is going to happen in the form of DLC, which I think is going to be paid, but how much it's going to cost, I don't know. I can't imagine it gonna be too much, considering how we get 3 factions and the rest of the game, like the basic gameplay, for $3. Anyways, currently it costs $3, and you are getting quite a bit of it. Granted, you could get all of this and more for free if you speak Japanese, but hey, translator's gonna make a living too. Anyways, I think it's certainly worth the $3. I put around 18 hours into this game so far, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. The interactions between the tactical and strategical layer are very tight and very well designed, I think. And just the overall fluidity of everything. Like, the game feels very sleek. As I said, it never feels like it bogs down. It's pretty simple on the surface, but there's actually quite a bit of depth to it that you have to get to grips with all the different unit types. There's a ton of different units in this game with different skills, and like, they have all kinds of different properties that I didn't go into detail with, different movement speeds and different terrain, and there really is actually quite a bit to this game. And especially if we get some more. Right, another thing I didn't mention is that there's kind of a mercenary mode where you can actually play as just one single officer who gets hired by the other factions, and you participate in the battles with your own squad, and you can rise in the ranks, become a vassal of them. Well, this game certainly has a lot to offer for $3, and yeah, you really can't go wrong with it.